still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you?
I tried so hard.
We have a kind of handwriting on the wall.
I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't good enough.
Indulge yourself. No consequences.
So this represents all of the power production of mankind. Absolutely everything. Every car, every internal combustion engine, every generator, every power station, all of it. Whether it's in China or America or Japan or Italy or wherever. This is the entire power production of mankind. And especially when we're burning hydrocarbons, all of that ultimately ends up as heat in the environment. Yep, that's right. Just running mankind actually heats up the planet. But it's not the only thing that heats up the planet. You see, when we burn this stuff, we get some carbon dioxide, which gets us a little bit of extra energy from the sun. So what's that look like in terms of the yardstick that we have here? So this is what global warming looks like compared to the entire power production of mankind. It's about 10 times bigger. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, in that even if we were to stop all of mankind's heat generating things tomorrow, like that, in an instant, all that carbon dioxide is still going to remain in the environment for an extended period of time. So if you're asking questions like, what can we do about global warming? You're kind of asking the wrong questions.
So you are saying this has already happened?
Sort of.
It's an interesting interaction, to be sure. Long after everyone who watches this video is dead and buried.
Before long I'll be dead, and you, and your brother, and your sister, and all of her children.
Here is a problem which transcends our particular generation. It is an intergenerational problem.
All of us dead, all of us rotting in the ground. It's the family name that lives on. It's all that lives on.
If we don't do the right thing now, there are very serious problems that our children and grandchildren will have to face.
Not your personal glory, not your honor, but family.
History will look back at this challenge as one that mankind was wholly unequipped to deal with.
I can make you an offer. An offer I rarely make.
But ultimately, the biggest foe wasn't some enemy, foreign or domestic, trying to undermine the fabric of our society, but something far closer to home. The deal was just too tempting.
I'm afraid the fault, dear Tane, is not in our stars, but in ourselves.
The idea that we should immediately stop burning fossil fuel has such severe economic consequences that no one, of course, will take it seriously.
Greed is right. Greed works.
What about our lives, you son of a bitch? I repeat, all other priorities are rescinded.
Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit.
We're not gonna make it, are we?
Tell me I'm everything you despise. That I'm the personification of evil.
But the most damning thing of all, I think I can live with it.
I'm what? Responsible for the breakdown of the fabric of society and world order. I'm a one-man genocide.
And if I had to do it all over again, I would.
The fault, de Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves.
In many ways, the perfect crime.
A scorpion was walking along the bank of a river, wondering how to get to the other side.
Not perfect in its planning or its execution.
He asked the fox to take him on his back across the river. The fox said no. If I do that, they'll sting me. The scorpion assured him, if I did that, we'd both drown.
Yeah, this is one of those interesting crimes that comes from, its nature.
But halfway across the river, the scorpion stung him. The fox turned to the scorpion and said, "Why did you do that? Now you'll drown too." "I couldn't help it," said the scorpion. "It's my nature."
I can change almost anything. But I can't change human nature.
Bank Heist is great and all.
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
But you run the risk of getting caught and put in jail, to be punished for your actions against those who you've harmed. But what if the crime was one which you were guaranteed that you would never get caught or punished for?
Everyone's gonna know what you've done.
Well then? Because you would be long dead by then.
Do you have any children, Captain Picard? A family?
No.
Then you have sacrificed too much for your career.
Yes, this is all very interesting.
Yeah, that would be me. I don't have any kids. But even I have a passive appreciation that if you enjoyed swimming in the pool, you know, swimming in the pool was nice. Pissing in it before you leave, that's kind of a jerk move. You know, what if your crime was so perfect that the people you were hurting hadn't even been born yet?
You understand, don't you? Without condoning or condemning. I understand.
"I couldn't help it," said the scorpion. "It's my nature."
What does human morality say about that?
There comes a time in a man's life that you cannot know, when he looks down at the first smile of his baby girl and realizes he must change the world for her.
Hell, what if you were even unaware of what you were doing?
You could live a long, long time, live well too. Indulge yourself. No consequences.
And there were people going around telling you that you weren't doing anything wrong.
No hangovers. Eat well. Live long.
Now that's a deal the devil himself wouldn't have to negotiate.
Now listen, darling. I don't want to pressure you, but why don't we take a teensy little look at the contract?
This isn't a Faustian deal. It's a Faustian deal with benefits. And the deal comes with a legacy.
You know what legacy means? It's what you pass down to your children and your children's children. It's what remains of you when you're gone.
Thousands of years ago, men built Stonehenge. No one remembers their names, who they were, or why they did it. But people remember their legacy. My legacy, our legacy, will endure far longer than this. So it all starts with this. What you cannot see is about 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, our atmosphere. And when I breathe that in, I use that oxygen to burn some of the fat, essentially some of the hydrocarbon in my body, which is chemically almost identical to oil. And I excrete now 15% oxygen, 5% carbon dioxide, which it turns out is chemically, basically indistinguishable from what this is doing. This, of course, is some hydrocarbon, which, this has been in the ground for a very long time, and legacy all of its own. But it turns out, because I measured this earlier, that if I put this on a low setting, about here somewhere, this is about how much carbon dioxide my body is producing all the time. This is just my carbon footprint for being alive. And if I could solidify all of this carbon dioxide and express it as a solid, it would be about 1 gram per minute. And this is about 1 gram. But what about my first world lifestyle? Well, it turns out that's about 10 times bigger than my metabolic carbon footprint. So that's roughly 3 of these things on full power. So this is your carbon footprint of your typical first world lifestyle. And of course, this will be going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days per year. And for those who want an interesting comparison, Musk's big rocket burns about 1,000 tons of methane to make about 3,000 tons of carbon dioxide. And it does that in about 3 minutes. So it's about a 1,000 tons or so per minute, 1 million or so kilos per minute, 1 billion or so grams per minute. Humans, you'll recall, breathe out about 1 gram per minute, so this would be about the carbon footprint of 1 billion or so people breathing. That's about 1/10 of the world's population, or you need 10 of these to roughly give it the same carbon footprint as the world breathing, with the total carbon dioxide footprint being about 10 times bigger than that. Give or take, that's the entire energy production of mankind, and that's running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 10 years a decade, and so on. So this represents all of those Elon Musk rockets, the entire power production of mankind, which, like a rocket, produces a significant amount of heat which does go into the atmosphere. And this is global warming on the same scale. So this is the real problem, that even if we stop all of our heat production tomorrow and don't produce any more carbon dioxide, all of the legacy carbon dioxide is still in the atmosphere, still heating up the planet. So how long will it remain in the atmosphere? Well, eventually most of it will dissolve out into the oceans. How long will that take? Ballpark figures. You will be able to turn off your first carbon dioxide heater about 10 years after you've stopped generating carbon dioxide. The second one will take about twice as long, after about another 20 years. The next one will take 40 or so years. So in total, this is basically the lifespan of humans. Anyone who is alive when we stop producing carbon dioxide will not see global warming reduce beyond about 70, 50%, that sort of thing, of what it is at the moment. And it gets progressively slower as you go down to the point where to get rid of all of this will take millennia. But this is the real problem, is we're not to the point of where we are anywhere close to reducing the amount of carbon dioxide that we produce. In fact, quite the opposite. We are adding carbon dioxide to the environment. We're actually increasing the rate of global warming by about 1 torch every 10 or so years. Well, can't we just take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere more quickly? You can't. It's spilled milk. Yeah, you can try cleaning it up, but realistically, it took the entire population of the planet burning stuff for the best part of a century to put that into the atmosphere. Even if you had a power source that could take it out again, it's going to take at least that long again. If you're looking for a quick fix to get the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere...
And how do we do it?
You can't.
I can save you the trouble. It doesn't exist. And no, trees are an absolute waste of time. They sort of suck up carbon dioxide for those few decades, but then they die and they release that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. But this was always the way it was going to go. In 1985, Carl Sagan explained all of this to Congress.
So we have a kind of handwriting on the wall.
And all we got was 40 years of global warming conspiracies.
Captain, maybe we ought to turn on the searchlights now.
Oh. That's just what they'll be expecting us to do.
They virtually ignore the sun as a factor of climate change.
The sun is driving climate change. CO2 is irrelevant.
It's the sun, stupid.
Can global warming be happening as expected if the world has stopped getting hotter?
The Earth basically has not been warming for the last 15 years or so.
First of all, I'm not a believer in global warming. I'm not a believer in man-made global warming. It could be warming and it's going to start to cool at some point.
By the way, there was a complete and total dead stop to all global warming for over 15 years, and rather than readjust their models, current climate scientists employed by your tax dollars simply chalk it up to being the pause.
Yes, if you want a real touch of irony, yes, that was Steven Crowder claiming there's been a total dead stop in global warming. You can see the one he's talking about, right? So he could release this video not only in the hottest year in recorded history, but in the hottest August in recorded history. And where are we now? Well, out of the last 9 years, every single one of them was in the top 9 hottest years on record. It's 9 for 9.
We keep hearing that 2014 has been the warmest year on record. I asked the chair, you know what this is? It's a snowball. And that's just from outside here. So it's very, very cold out.
Climate change is not science. It's religion.
So this is what global warming looked like in the 1980s when Carl Sagan gave his warning to Congress. This is what it looked like in the 1990s, in the year 2000, in the year 2010, in the year 2020.
That at the present rate of burning of fossil fuels, the present rate of increase of minor infrared absorbing gases in the Earth's atmosphere.
Accepting the IPCC reports, you have to take into account the fact that modeling has been wrong for 20 to 30 years. It's always been overestimating the amount of climate change that's actually taken place.
And just to give you a clue about how completely, utterly delusional this is, back in 1985, when Carl Sagan had a fraction of the data and computing power that we have today.
As you've heard, the best estimates, they certainly have some uncertainty attached to them.
And this was his prediction with those uncertainties.
Present rate of burning of fossil fuels, the present rate of increase of minor infrared absorbing gases in the Earth's atmosphere, that there will be a several centigrade degree temperature increase on the Earth, global average, by the middle to the end of the next century, and that has a variety of consequences.
In reality, it wasn't quite that high, but hey, come on, let's be real here. This was in 1985. A-ha was just about to become iconic. Bruce Springsteen was and Madonna was into Your Angel and Like a Virgin, and a car phone looked like this. And even with that era technology, the predictions are pretty bloody good. Now let's compare that to Ben Shapiro's expert prediction that global warming stopped completely in about the year 2000.
The Earth basically has not been warming for the last 15 years or so.
Curiously, forgetting to mention that those were basically the hottest 15 years on record. If you think the quality of climate change deniers has gotten any better, well, remember how I was saying, 9 out of the 9 last years have been the hottest years on record. Well, climate change deniers will happily tell you that it's all a hoax because there hasn't been a steady increase in temperature over those 10 years. Yeah, if only we didn't have like 100 years of data or something.
Here is a problem which transcends our particular generation. It is an intergenerational problem. If we don't do the right thing now, there are very serious problems that our children and grandchildren will have to face.
Live long and prosper, Father.
It's not what you did, son, that angers me so.
We'll do nothing because you can do nothing.
You know what legacy means? Harren and all his sons roasted alive within these walls. And so every child alive still knows his name, 300 years after his death.
And there will be folks out there that, yeah, well, doesn't affect me. And you're right, it probably won't. But let me just give you a taste of what's coming. In the early 80s, when I was a kid, my parents drove me across the Hoover Dam. Aggravated by global warming, you want to know what it looks like now? Lake Mead, which provides power to Las Vegas as well as water for 5 states and some 25 million Americans, depends on this water. Well, let's just do a little extrapolation here. The water level will drop below power generation levels in about a decade, and will reach dead pool levels after another decade or so. 5 states, 25 million people.
I do not think climate change is a national security threat.
I can't lie to you about your chances, but you'd have my sympathies.
And no, I don't expect people to pay any more attention to me than they did to Carl Sagan some 40 years ago. Historically, mankind has never been able to act until it was time to start digging mass graves of one sort or another.
I couldn't help it, said the Scorpion. It's my nature.
And then, even only reluctantly, I mean, hell, you only have to look at the response to the Maui fires, especially on Twitter. It's wall-to-wall, dumbest conspiracies ever about space lasers. And if you want to know why it's dumb, I'll leave a video about why it's impossible here, and you have to fill in some of the blanks yourself. But the single word answer would be divergence. Even the best lasers aren't perfectly collimated. The beams diverge, which is why they're basically completely useless by the time they're put into space. All of this was well understood when I was a kid, and they were doing the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, again in the 1980s. Yeah, and I'm sure those same space lasers is what's making the drought in the US Southwest and the devastating forest fires and why the Rockies are being trashed because of pine beetles.
Squirt up, and here I am in the Wind Rivers. And you just have to look around. Somewhere between half and 70% of the trees here are dead from the pine beetle. Because this place gets warmer winters than it used to. Don't kill off the beetles. Half the trees are dead already. It's altitude related, so as you go uphill, what you find is there comes a point where it gets sufficiently cold in winter to kill the beetles, and you go from dead trees to living ones, and it really, from one side of the road to the other, it changes like that. Now bear in mind, you can't simply plant more trees here, because if you plant more pine trees, the pine beetle will simply kill those too. You're looking at the ecosystem of the entire United States changing, and mankind's response is the same dumb conspiracy stuff that started with Sagan in the 1980s.
Climate change is not science. It's religion.
I can change almost anything. But I can't change human nature.
So what actions are actually possible if taking the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere is basically a non-starter? Well, there's one, and only one option on the table. It's been known about for decades and basically revolves around, if we've been adding carbon dioxide progressively to the atmosphere for the best part of the last 100 years, why, after the burst of industrialization in the 40s, did it actually get colder? It's not a mystery, but given how the world is rife with global warming conspiracies, I know that I'll be long dead before things get so bad that people will look seriously at the only viable option on the table. And yeah, sure, you can do your part by sharing this video and its two following parts. And one last thing from 1985.
Don't you forget about me.